So I'm going to start by installing this bushing end in the axle housing. Then I can adjust the ball socket end to get the length right. Now I'm going to look and eyeball the outside and see what kind of area I have sticking out on these tires. So here's what I'm looking at. You can see how much this passenger side tire is sticking out of this well. And then when we come to this side, you see that we don't have quite so much. That's going to be the difference in our preset for this bar. So I'm going to have to draw that front end over a bit to get this ball socket in.
To help me draw that over, I had to use a small ratchet strap. I had turned the track bar in to get it close enough that it would fit, because this was only a 2-inch lift and I didn't need very much on that track bar.
So I evened everything up and I've got this started. I haven't got the jam nut tight yet. I'll do that once everything is in and tight. This is where a 3/4 inch stubby ratcheting wrench comes in really handy. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to install this cotter pin. We got to get the hole lined up, and it's kind of a blind area to get to, so you kind of got to feel for it. That's it. All right, so that cotter pin's bent out of the way. It's going to lock this up. Everything is where it needs to be. Now I'm going to grease this ball socket, and we have completed the installation. I did this with hand tools just because a lot of people might not want to tackle this because they don't have power tools. Now I do have a lift, and that does make it easier, but on something like this, you could do it in your driveway really easy with either a 3/4 inch wrench or 19 millimeter. This was a 15 millimeter, and you might need a pair of cutters to get that cotter pin out.
The other tool you're going to need is a large wrench to tighten up the stop nut on this track bar. I used a large crescent wrench. There is another tool that you're going to need to complete this job, and we're lucky enough at SeaTech to have the Hunter Hawkeye Elite.
So what is it that we're getting ready to do? Well, we're going to do an alignment on this Jeep. And before I can go any further, I got to give a shout out to all the great math teachers that have been in my life. If it wasn't for you, I couldn't do this job. What we're getting ready to do is some basic geometry. We're going to set multiple angles to a given plane so this vehicle will drive properly, safely down the road. That's about as math as it gets. I realize my methods aren't the most scientific, but if it was good enough for Carol Shelby, it's definitely good enough for me. So what I've done is I've taken this plastic washer, tied it to a piece of string, and it dangles from this fender lip down to the top of the tire. I did the same thing on the other side. I just wanted to get a good visual that my side-to-side angle was right. Now I'm feeling pretty confident that everything is preset for the alignment, and I'm going to tighten up that jam nut on that track bar. Hunter has made this a lot easier than it used to be. We can go in and pick our vehicle, and they've got a database of everything that we need to know. This database goes back a long way too. So if you've got an old Mustang or something like that, it's going to be in here. I've preset the tire pressures before we got to this point, and that's a really important thing to do on an alignment, is make sure your tire pressures are properly set. We're going to go through this compensation procedure real quick. So where are we at? With an overhead look, we can see we've got a little bit of adjustment to do. But again, this database tells us what we need to know, how we're going to make these adjustments. The caster measurement, well, that's a non-wear item, and since this thing's lifted a little bit, I'm not surprised to see it. But if we were going to adjust the caster, we could rotate these eccentrics and we could bring that right in. And I think we're going to go ahead and do that. It says, though, right here, some vehicles may require a kit, but we'll see if we can bring it in. On the toe, we've got illustrations that tell us exactly what we need to do. And if we need more information, we've got a video built into the system that will walk us through it. And typically it's a picture of the vehicle that we're working on. The video would also be there, and there's an animated adjustment available that we can do for that caster alignment as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen up this bolt, and I believe that's going to allow this eccentric to rotate inside. So when that happens, we should see our number change on the screen.
And this is right where I figured out that we've got to have that bolt kit for the eccentric, because this arm's not moving back and forth, and this is something we really need to get done, but I don't think we're going to have time to do it today, and I don't have the part. So we'll just tighten this back up.
It's important to know that caster is a non-wear angle, and what we're thinking about when we're thinking about caster in our overhead is the upper ball joint in its position where it sets over the lower ball joint. We always try to explain that like the forks on a bicycle or a motorcycle. That's our return to zero, our return to center, and without that, the steering wouldn't come back after a turn. The thing about caster is, and I'm not saying it's right, but if our caster is the same number side to side, typically it will not give you a driving issue. Now, this Jeep does not have the kit required, and I'm wondering, there we go. Hunter tells us what it would take for us to be able to adjust that caster. This set of adjustment bolts with the eccentric washers would be required. That's something that we can do the next time it's in the shop. Again, this is a non-wear item, and we're not going to have to deal with it. This is a better look at a different vendor. Some people also put ball joints in that are off center. That's just ways to get something in specification.
So Hunter's going to tell us exactly what we're supposed to do. We're going to adjust with wind toe, and it's going to tell us that Jeeps are a little bit different, and we can adjust the toe, but then we're also going to have to adjust the steering angle. Excuse me, the steering wheel. So we've put the wheels straight ahead right now, but our steering wheel is off. So now we're going to adjust the tie rod until the total toe is within specification. As you can see, we've got a ways to pull this in. It's always a good idea to spray some rust penetrant on these threads. You don't know when the last time they were moved, and it can be a little stiff. We want to let that settle. We're going to equalize this rotation at the tie rod ends. Once we're in the green and the numbers are set, we can tighten up the tie rod ends. The next step is to level and lock that steering wheel, and that way we can adjust the drag link and the steering wheel will be set straight ahead. You can see we have a ways to go. We've got that toe set, but now we've got to adjust the drag link so the steering wheel faces straight ahead. Sometimes the best tools in the world don't replace a good pair of pliers or a hammer. Boy, that's pretty good.
Now we got to tighten up the pinch bolts for this drag link so it can't move. I had to use 15mm wrenches to get in here, and everything worked out great.
So the last thing what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to lubricate every socket under here that we can. I already did the shakedown before the alignment to make sure nothing was loose. If something had been loose, the alignment would have been pointless because we'd have had slop. But this thing's tight, and I think we're just about ready for a road test.
With that drag link locked, with the engine running, we're going to steer ahead. We have to restart the procedure if something goes on, but I think we're going to be on. Looks good there. Now let's look at our numbers. So we're pretty happy with that. Again, I'd like to do something eventually with this caster, but for today, I think it's going to be all right to drive. We're driving down the highway. It's a rainy day, and we're not feeling anything like what we were feeling before. It is a Jeep. It always does seem to feel a little top heavy, a little jerky because of the short wheelbase, but it's not giving us that violent steering wheel action. And we just hit a bump there and it didn't take off. So I'm pretty satisfied that we've got this worked out.
I hope you've enjoyed working with me on this project. Really an easy install, great part from Rancho Suspensions. Thanks for the advice from KC Customs here in Kansas City. And our customer was real happy with this. So join us again at C-Tech Auto Tech and let's fix something else.